They taught you that soil dies without chemicals, that degraded land requires synthetic nitrogen, phosphate rock shipments, and annual dependency on industrial supply chains. They reclassified 3 pre-industrial techniques as primitive agriculture, inefficient subsistence methods incompatible with modern yield requirements. The Amazon basin holds over 2 million acres of terra preta, soil engineered between 450 BCE and 950 CE, to remain fertile for over 2,000 years without external inputs. Medieval European 3-field systems sustained populations for 5 centuries while building topsoil depth. Chinese composting stratification fed empires without nitrogen depletion. These were not farming methods. They were closed-loop soil generation systems that produced fertility as a byproduct of food production. The modern reclassification was not accidental. Amazonian societies engineered terra preta by integrating charcoal, bone, manure, and food waste into soil matrices at ratios archaeologists still measure in excavation layers. The biochar component, produced through controlled combustion at temperatures between 400 and 700 degrees Celsius, created porous carbon structures with surface areas exceeding 300 square meters per gram. These structures functioned as permanent retention systems for water, nutrients, and microbial populations. Soil samples from terra preta sites near Santarém contain 3 times the organic matter, 5 times the phosphorus, and 70 times the charcoal of surrounding rainforest soils. The carbon in these systems dates to periods between 1,500 and 2,500 years ago and remains chemically stable. Indigenous populations did not fertilize soil. They built soil that fertilized itself through microbial colonization of biochar pores. Medieval 3-field rotation divided land into grain, legume, and fallow cycles that fixed atmospheric nitrogen through root nodule bacteria while preventing pathogen accumulation. Records from Carolingian estates document wheat yields maintained at 4 to 6 bushels per acre for 3 centuries without yield collapse. The legume phase converted atmospheric nitrogen into soil-available nitrates at rates exceeding 15 pounds per acre annually. The fallow phase allowed mineralization of organic matter and restoration of soil structure. Chinese texts from the Han Dynasty describe composting pits constructed in 3-layer systems with green matter, manure, and earth arranged in ratios designed to control temperature, moisture, and decomposition rates. The resulting compost contained nitrogen levels comparable to modern synthetic fertilizers, but released nutrients gradually through microbial breakdown rather than immediate dissolution. These were administrative systems. Failure to maintain soil cycles resulted in famine. Terra preta production required no external inputs. Biochar was generated from agricultural waste and forest clearing debris through smoldering combustion in earthen pits. The process converted biomass into stable carbon, while producing cooking fuel as a secondary output. 1 ton of dry biomass yielded approximately 300 kilograms of biochar with a carbon content exceeding 80%. The resulting material remained chemically inert for millennia, but increased cation exchange capacity in soil by factors of 10 to 20. Adding biochar to degraded tropical soil increased water retention by 18% and reduced nutrient leaching by 40% in rainfall events exceeding 50 millimeters. The system required labor but eliminated dependency on mined or manufactured inputs. 3-field rotation required only seed and knowledge of nitrogen-fixing species. Farmers planted fava beans, peas, or clover in rotation with wheat and rye. The legume roots hosted rhizobium bacteria that converted atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia through enzymatic reduction. Upon decomposition, legume residues released nitrogen into soil at concentrations sufficient for subsequent grain crops. The system operated without shipping networks, processing facilities, or chemical synthesis. Chinese composting required only organic waste and time. Households collected kitchen scraps, agricultural residues, and human waste into sealed pits, where thermophilic bacteria raised internal temperatures to 65 degrees Celsius, killing pathogens while preserving nitrogen content. After 90 days, the compost contained nitrogen levels between 2 and 4% by dry weight, comparable to many synthetic fertilizers but in slow-release organic form. The knowledge transfer was intergenerational. Children learned pit construction, layering ratios, and maturation indicators through observation. The Dust Bowl exposed the fragility of chemical-dependent monoculture. Between 1930 and 1936, industrial farming stripped topsoil from 100 million acres across the Great Plains. Farmers had adopted mechanized plowing and continuous wheat monoculture, breaking prairie sod that had accumulated organic matter for 10,000 years. When drought arrived, the depleted soil became airborne. Dust storms carried 350 million tons of topsoil eastward in single events. Photographs from 1935 showed dunes covering farmhouses in Oklahoma and Kansas. The federal government documented 500,000 people displaced and 2.5 million migrating from affected regions. Crop failures reached 90% in some counties. Meanwhile, Amish and Mennonite communities in Pennsylvania and Ohio maintained productivity through techniques inherited from European rotation systems. Their farms used manure composting, crop rotation with clover and alfalfa, and minimal tillage practices that preserved soil structure. Yield data from Lancaster County shows corn production remained stable between 30 and 40 bushels per acre throughout the drought years, while surrounding industrial farms recorded complete failures. The Amish were not lucky. They had maintained soil organic matter levels above 4%, while industrial farms operated below 2%. When rainfall ceased, soil with higher organic matter retained moisture. Soil without structure became dust. The contrast was measured in migration records. Amish populations remained stable. Industrial farming regions depopulated. Synthetic nitrogen production requires 900 degrees Celsius temperatures and pressures exceeding 200 atmospheres in the Haber-Bosch process. Producing 1 ton of ammonia consumes 1.8 tons of natural gas and releases 2.6 tons of carbon dioxide. Global nitrogen fertilizer production exceeds 110 million tons annually, consuming 2% of total natural gas supply and generating 300 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions. The nitrogen is applied at rates exceeding 150 pounds per acre for corn production. Approximately 50% of applied nitrogen escapes through volatilization, leaching, or denitrification. The escaped nitrogen acidifies soil, contaminates groundwater, and forms nitrous oxide with global warming potential 298 times greater than carbon dioxide. The economic cost exceeds $800 per ton for delivered fertilizer. Biochar systems produce similar nitrogen retention using atmospheric carbon and agricultural waste. Terra preta soils contain nitrogen levels between 0.3 and 0.4%, 3 times higher than surrounding rainforest soils, without external nitrogen addition. The biochar retains applied nutrients and prevents leaching, reducing total nitrogen requirements by 40 to 60%. Production costs for biochar approximate $200 per ton using simple pyrolysis technology. Legume rotation fixes atmospheric nitrogen at rates between 10 and 30 pounds per acre annually without energy input beyond photosynthesis. The economic value of fixed nitrogen equals $150 to $450 per acre at current fertilizer prices. The carbon cost is negative. Legumes sequester atmospheric carbon into root biomass and soil organic matter. Modern soil science confirms what administrative records documented. Research published in soil biology journals demonstrates that biochar addition increases microbial biomass by factors of 2 to 5 and diversifies bacterial populations across multiple phyla. The porous structure provides habitat for bacteria, fungi, and archaea that cycle nutrients through enzymatic processes. Studies measuring enzyme activity in terra preta show phosphatase levels 5 times higher than control soils, indicating active microbial phosphorus cycling. Nitrogen mineralization rates in biochar-amended soils exceed unamended controls by 30 to 50% due to enhanced microbial activity. The carbon structures resist decomposition through chemical recalcitrance, with half-lives exceeding 1,000 years in tropical conditions. Long-term agronomic trials in temperate regions show that crop rotation with legumes maintains grain yields equivalent to synthetic nitrogen application at 120 pounds per acre, while increasing soil organic carbon by 0.05% annually. After 20 years, rotated soils contain 20% more organic matter than continuously cropped soils receiving synthetic nitrogen. The organic matter increases water-holding capacity, reduces erosion, and buffers pH fluctuations. Composting research documents that properly managed systems retain 80 to 90% of initial nitrogen content, while converting organic matter into humus with cation exchange capacity exceeding 60 milliequivalents per 100 grams. The humus persists in soil for decades, providing gradual nutrient release synchronized with plant uptake patterns. The mechanisms were documented in agricultural texts from multiple civilizations before reclassification as primitive. The chemical agriculture system emerged from munitions production capacity. After 1945, factories that synthesized ammonia for explosives required peacetime markets. Government agricultural agencies promoted synthetic nitrogen as modernization and scientific progress. Extension programs taught farmers that traditional techniques were inefficient, labor-intensive, and incompatible with mechanization. Subsidy structures embedded in commodity support programs reimbursed farmers for fertilizer purchases, but provided no support for cover cropping, composting, or biochar production. Crop insurance policies favored monoculture simplicity over rotation complexity. The economic incentives were structural. Farmers who maintained traditional soil building practices received lower subsidies, faced higher insurance premiums, and operated outside supply chain infrastructure designed for chemical inputs. Educational systems reinforced the hierarchy. Agricultural curricula taught fertilizer application rates, but rarely included courses on composting, microbiology, biochar production, or legume inoculation. The terminology itself revealed the classification. Traditional techniques became alternative agriculture, organic methods, or sustainable practices, linguistically positioned as deviations from a chemical norm. The reclassification was administrative. Techniques that had fed civilizations for millennia became niche practices for ideological farmers unwilling to adopt progress. The economic structure made chemical dependency rational. Individual farmers who rejected chemicals accepted lower subsidies and higher risk. The system required collective adoption, but imposed individual penalties for resistance. The pattern repeated across multiple soil technologies. Mycorrhizal fungal networks that transfer nutrients between plants and increase phosphorus uptake by factors of 10 were marginalized as soil biology became soil chemistry. Green manure systems that built nitrogen through cover cropping were replaced by anhydrous ammonia injection. Terracing techniques that prevented erosion while capturing sediment were abandoned for moldboard plowing that maximized short-term tillable area. Each replacement increased dependency on external inputs while reducing soil self-sufficiency. The Aztec Chinampa systems produced 4 crops annually through integrated aquaculture and sediment recycling, but were reclassified as primitive after Spanish colonization introduced European plow agriculture. Korean paddy upland rotation maintained rice yields for centuries through flooding cycles that fixed nitrogen and controlled pests, but lost research funding when the Green Revolution promoted chemical-intensive monoculture. Indigenous Australian firestick farming maintained soil fertility through controlled burning that released nutrients and stimulated native plant growth, but was criminalized as destructive land management. The pattern was consistent. Techniques that generated fertility without purchase were systematically reclassified as inefficient. Climate projections indicate synthetic nitrogen production will face supply constraints as natural gas reserves deplete and carbon pricing increases. Phosphate rock reserves concentrate in 3 countries, creating geopolitical vulnerability in fertilizer supply chains. Soil degradation from chemical agriculture has reduced organic matter content below critical thresholds across 33% of global agricultural land, decreasing both water retention and nutrient cycling capacity. The combination of resource depletion, supply vulnerability, and soil degradation will force agricultural systems toward techniques that build rather than extract fertility. Biochar production from agricultural waste addresses carbon sequestration while restoring soil function. Legume rotation reduces nitrogen dependency while fixing atmospheric carbon. Composting converts organic waste into fertility rather than methane emissions. These are not alternatives. They are the techniques that sustained agriculture before fossil fuel subsidy made soil mining economically rational. The return will not be ideological. It will be imposed by thermodynamics and resource depletion. Agricultural systems that cannot generate their own fertility will collapse when supply chains fail. Systems that build soil will continue producing. If this vault revealed techniques they reclassified to sell you dependency, subscribe to remember what history tried to erase. Knowledge only survives when someone refuses to forget. The next vault opens soon.